All right, so this all went down a few years back. My name's Jason, by the way. I used to work as an electrician, and this happened on one of those late, exhausting Friday nights. You know the kind. You're beat, just want to get home, grab a beer and crash. I was driving my usual route home. It's this long, dark road out in rural Pennsylvania. Barely any streetlights, no traffic, just trees and silence. I've driven it 100 times, but that night, man, something felt off. Like deep in my gut, I just knew something wasn't right. About halfway down the road, I see this car on the shoulder. Hazards flashing, and there's this woman sitting inside, waving her arms like crazy. I'm thinking, all right, she probably needs help. So, I slow down and pull up next to her. I roll down my window, and she leans out, looking all frantic. She's like, "My car broke down and my phone's dead. Can you help me?" Now, I'm not the kind of guy to just leave someone stranded, especially not in the middle of nowhere. So I nod and say, "Yeah, no problem. Let me park up ahead and check it out." I grab my flashlight from the truck and head over. But the closer I get to her car, the weirder this whole thing feels. First off, her car doesn't even look broken. The hood's not popped, there's no smoke, nothing, and she's just sitting there staring at me. Not nervous, not thankful, just watching. That's when I notice something. Out of the corner of my eye, there's movement. At first, I think it's just the wind messing with the trees, but no, it's a shadow. A tall shadow. It's standing just beyond the edge of my flashlight beam, barely moving. My gut's screaming at me now. I stand up straight, look at her, and ask, "Can you pop the hood?" She does, but I'm not even looking at the car. I'm scanning the area, trying to figure out what's going on. And then I see them. Two guys step out of the trees behind her car. One of them's holding a crowbar. I don't say a word. My heart's pounding, but I keep it together. I wipe my hands on my jeans and say, "Looks like it's your battery. I've got jumper cables in my truck. Hang tight." I turn and start walking back to my truck, keeping it casual. But inside, I'm losing it. I know if I panic, they'll know I'm onto them. As soon as I get to my truck, I jump in, lock the doors, and fire up the engine. Then I floor it. In the rearview mirror, I see them all standing there, the woman and the two guys, just staring at me as I speed off. I didn't stop until I hit a gas station about 10 miles down the road. I called the cops, told them everything, but by the time they got out there, the car was gone. No woman, no guys, nothing. To this day, I don't know what they had planned, but I can tell you this. If I hadn't trusted my gut that night, I don't think I'd be here telling you this story. Let me tell you something wild. There's this guy, Evan. He's just a regular dude living alone in this small kind of rundown apartment in Maine. 3rd floor, nothing fancy. It's late one night, dead quiet, and Evan's knocked out cold. Everything's normal. But then, bam, he's awake, heart racing, and he doesn't even know why. You ever get that feeling? Like something's off, but you can't put your finger on it? At first, he brushes it off. Maybe I'm just dreaming, he thinks. But then he hears it. This faint, metallic sound. Tink, tink, tink. Real quiet, like metal tapping on metal. It's not loud, but when it's that silent, stuff like that hits you hard. Evan just lays there for a second, trying to convince himself it's nothing, but that sound keeps going. His brain starts racing. Did he leave something on? Is it the pipes? Then it hits him. The noise. It's coming from the kitchen. Now let me tell you, his gut is screaming at him not to move, but curiosity gets the best of him, and he grabs his phone, turns on the flashlight, and gets up. His apartment's tiny, so it doesn't take long to check stuff. First stop, the front door, still locked. Windows, locked. Everything's fine. At least it looks that way. But the noise still going. Tink, tink, tink. Steady, almost like someone's playing with a spoon. Evan starts inching toward the kitchen, his feet barely making a sound on the floor. The air feels heavy, you know, like it's pressing down on him. His breathing's shallow. His heart's pounding so loud he swears whoever's in there can probably hear it. And when he steps into the kitchen, his stomach drops. The balcony door is wide open. Rain's coming down in sheets, soaking the floor. The curtains are whipping around in the wind like they've got a life of their own. And on the counter, right on the edge, is a knife. Not just sitting there either. It's rocking back and forth like someone just put it down. Evan freezes. Every instinct in his body is yelling at him to leave. His mind's running a mile a minute. Did someone break in? How? He checked the locks. He checked everything, but none of that matters now. He's not sticking around to find out. Grabbing his keys, he bolts. Doesn't even stop to grab shoes or a jacket. He runs straight into the hallway and calls 911. When the cops show up, they search the whole place top to bottom. Nothing. No one. No footprints. No signs of a break-in. It's like whoever or whatever was there just vanished into thin air. The freakiest part? That gut feeling Evan had before he even woke up. Like some part of him knew something wasn't right. That's the thing that stuck with him. He couldn't shake it. He moved out a couple of days later, left half his stuff behind. He didn't care. He just wanted out. So, I was driving home one night after a long shift at work. You know the kind. When you're so tired, you're practically counting the minutes until you hit your bed. It was late, probably close to midnight, and the rain was coming down steady. The kind of rain that makes the road look like a mirror under your headlights. The route I take home? It's quiet. No traffic, no streetlights, just this long stretch of highway with fields on both sides. Usually it's relaxing, but that night, something weird happened. I'm about halfway home, and up ahead I see this figure in the road. At first I thought it was a deer or maybe a stray dog. It happens. But as I get closer, I realize it's a person. Just standing there. I slow down, of course. I mean, who wouldn't? But right away something feels off. The guy's just standing dead still, rain pouring down on him. He's not moving, not even looking my way. Just standing there like he's frozen. So I pull up a little closer, roll down my window just a crack, and call out, "Hey, you all right?" Nothing. He doesn't even flinch. He's soaked, wearing just a t-shirt and jeans, his hair plastered to his face. It's like he doesn't even notice I'm there. I try again. "You need help or something?" That's when he finally moves. Slowly he turns his head to look at me, and I swear the way he looked, it wasn't normal. His eyes were empty, not scared, not angry, just nothing. Like there was no one in there. At that point, I'm freaked out. My brain's screaming, "Just drive, leave!" But I can't. Before I know it, the guy turns and starts walking. Not toward me, not away. Just straight into the fields on the side of the road. Slow, steady, like he knows exactly where he's going. And then, he's gone, just swallowed up by the dark. I sat there for a minute, heart pounding, not sure what to do. Call the cops? Follow him? I wasn't about to go walking into some dark field, so I called the sheriff's office. Told them what happened, gave them the location, and they said they'd send someone to check it out. Hey, real quick, what would you have done? Would you have stopped? Let me know in the comments. And if you're into hearing stuff like this, hit subscribe. There's more where this came from. Anyway, I drove the rest of the way home, but man, I couldn't shake it. The way he looked, the way he moved, it was all wrong. That night I barely slept, just lying there, replaying it all in my head. The next morning I called the sheriff's office to follow up. They checked the area but didn't find anything. No footprints, no sign of anyone. It's like he vanished. A few days later, I'm talking to a coworker about it. Older guy, been in town forever. I tell him where it happened and his face goes pale. He's like, "Was this near the old Miller farm?" I say, "Yeah," and he just nods, all serious. "You're not the first to see him. People around here call him the Drifter. He shows up every now and then, always in the same spot. Nobody knows who he is, but some folks think he's connected to something bad that happened out there years ago." Hearing that gave me chills. I don't believe in ghosts, but I know what I saw, and knowing other people have seen him too, that just makes it worse. Now, every time I drive that road, especially when it's raining, I can't help but check the side of the road, just in case. But if I ever see him again, I'm not stopping. No way. So yeah, if you're ever driving alone on some dark road and see someone standing there, maybe just keep going. Some things are better left alone. It was a quiet, rainy evening in a small town in Illinois. Susan Daniels was chilling alone at her kitchen table, sipping a hot cup of coffee. The rain was tapping on the window, setting this kind of relaxing vibe. Outside, the streetlights looked all fuzzy in the mist and everything seemed calm. But man, Susan was about to find out how quickly things can flip. Susan was one of those people who double-checks everything. Every night she locked her doors and made sure the windows were shut tight. It was just how she rolled. Her mom drilled it into her head when she was a kid. "Always be careful, Susie," her mom used to say. And yeah, tonight was no different. She'd done her little security routine, locked up the house, and even turned on the porch light. Around 11:30, she closed her book and stretched. The rain had picked up, pounding on the roof a little louder. She loved nights like this, all cozy and quiet. But then, as she was rinsing her coffee mug, she heard this faint noise. It wasn't loud, just a little creak, like someone stepping on an old floorboard. She froze, her heart kind of jumping. "Susan, it's probably just the house. Old houses make noises, right?" But nah, something about this sound felt off, like really off. She couldn't shake it, so she decided to check the front door, just in case. She walked over, grabbed the knob, and wait for it. The door wasn't locked. Her stomach dropped. She was 100% sure she'd locked that door earlier. She remembered hearing the click of the deadbolt. But now, the door swung open a little when she touched it, showing her the dark, wet porch outside. Her heart started racing. Was someone in her house? She grabbed her phone and called 911. She kept her voice steady, but her hands were shaking like crazy. The dispatcher told her to stay calm and stay on the line. Susan grabbed a kitchen knife. Yeah, she wasn't taking any chances, and backed into a corner of the kitchen. Every little shadow looked like it was moving, and every sound made her jump. Time dragged. She could hear the rain slamming against the windows and a little thunder in the distance. Finally, she heard sirens. 2 cops showed up and came into the house, checking every room, closet, and corner. They even looked under the beds, but they found nothing. No muddy footprints, no broken windows, nada. "Cop, Mom, maybe you just forgot to lock the door. Happens all the time." Susan nodded, but deep down she knew she hadn't forgotten. She thanked them and locked the door again, triple-checked it this time, and went to bed. But sleep, forget it. Every little creak and groan in the house had her wide awake. The next morning she felt like a zombie. She made some coffee, trying to shake off the unease from the night before. That's when she remembered her security camera. She'd put it up about a month ago, right above the front door. She pulled up the app on her phone, not really expecting to see much, but then she saw it. At 11:47 p.m., there he was. A guy, tall and wearing a hoodie, just standing at her front door. He didn't knock or anything. He just stood there for a minute like he was listening. Then he reached out and tried the handle. And just like that, the door opened. Susan's stomach turned. She watched the guy step inside. He wasn't in a hurry or anything. He moved like he had all the time in the world. He disappeared off camera for a couple minutes, then came back and walked out, calm as ever, shutting the door behind him. Like what? Her hands were shaking as she called the cops again. When they showed up, she showed them the footage. Their whole vibe changed when they saw it. This wasn't just her forgetting to lock up. This dude had actually been in her house. The cops told her they'd patrol the area more and took the footage as evidence. They said he might have been scoping the place out, maybe planning to come back later to rob her or something. But Susan couldn't stop thinking about it. Why didn't he take anything? Why was he only inside for a few minutes? The idea of him just standing there, maybe watching her, made her skin crawl. Over the next few days, Susan went into full lockdown mode. She got new locks, the heavy-duty kind, put up more cameras, and even got herself a little dog for extra security. Her neighbors, once they heard what happened, were super supportive. They kept an eye out for anything sketchy and made sure she wasn't alone too much. Still, Susan couldn't shake the fear. Her home didn't feel like hers anymore. It felt violated. Weeks went by, but the cops never found the guy. The footage wasn't clear enough to ID him, and no one in the neighborhood recognized him. Life kinda went back to normal, but Susan was different. She was always on edge, double-checking locks, looking over her shoulder. Nights, especially rainy ones, freaked her out. She couldn't hear the rain without thinking about that night. This was real life. And the scariest part, the guy didn't break in. He didn't smash a window or force a door. He just walked in, like it was no big deal. So yeah, here's the takeaway. Always lock your doors, even if you think you're safe. Because sometimes, the real danger isn't what's outside. It's what you accidentally let in. Carlos moved into a new apartment in Mexico City, drawn to its affordable rent and great view of the skyline. The bustling city below and the vibrant culture made it an exciting place to start fresh. He was eager to settle in and make the place his own, enjoying the stunning view from his window every morning. At first, everything seemed fine, except for his neighbor, an elderly woman named Doña Rosa. She was always around, her presence almost inescapable. She lived across the hall and would often knock on his door at odd times, bringing tamales or asking if he needed anything. Her gestures were kind, but the frequency of her visits was unusual. Carlos appreciated her friendliness at first, but soon started feeling uneasy. The constant interruptions began to wear on him, making him question if he had made the right choice in moving there. One evening, Carlos came home late to find her standing outside his door, just staring at it. She seemed lost in thought, her eyes fixed on the door as if it held some deep secret. She didn't say anything, just smiled and went back to her apartment. Her smile was warm, yet it left Carlos feeling uneasy, as if there was something she wasn't telling him. It was odd, but Carlos dismissed it. He tried to convince himself that it was just a harmless, albeit strange, encounter. Things got stranger when, on a rainy night, he woke up to find his apartment door slightly open, even though he was sure he had locked it. The sound of the rain outside made the moment even more eerie. On his kitchen table was a note that said, "Welcome to the building, Carlos." The handwriting was neat and elegant, unlike any he had seen before. He had no idea how it got there. The mystery of the note and Doña Rosa's behavior left him feeling more puzzled than ever. When he asked Doña Rosa about it, she denied everything and seemed offended by the suggestion. Her eyes narrowed and she shook her head vehemently, as if the very idea was preposterous. Carlos apologized but started being more cautious. He couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss, and he began to notice small, unsettling details around his apartment. Then one night, during another storm, he heard knocking on his door. The sound was faint at first, but grew louder and more insistent, echoing through the empty hallways. When he opened it, the hallway was empty, but on the floor was a small handmade doll dressed in traditional clothing. The doll seemed out of place, almost eerie in the dim light. It had no face, and on its back was a note that read, "You are not alone." The message sent chills down his spine, making him feel watched and vulnerable. The next day, Doña Rosa's apartment was dark and silent. When Carlos asked the building manager about her, he was told that Doña Rosa had died 5 years ago, and that she had once lived in Carlos's apartment. Horrified, Carlos packed up and moved out the next day. To this day, he avoids old apartment buildings and always double-checks his locks, especially on stormy nights. Sarah, a young nurse, loved her life in rural Oregon. The gentle pace of the town, nestled amidst towering pines, suited her perfectly. Evenings were spent in the cozy comfort of her small cottage, reading or enjoying her garden. She planned to curl up with a good book and a cup of herbal tea. Little did she know this night would take a sinister turn. The shrill ring of the telephone pierced through the quiet of the night, jolting Sarah from her reading. Frowning, she glanced at the clock. 11:48 p.m. It was unusually late for a call. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach. She picked up the receiver, her voice hesitant. "Hello?" Silence. Still, only silence met her ears. The hair on the back of her neck prickled with fear. Just as she was about to hang up, a voice whispered, "I know where you live." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Fear shot through her veins. Before she could respond, the line went dead. She stood frozen, phone clutched in her hand, her heart pounding. The silence in the room seemed to amplify the threat. Sarah tried to rationalize the call, a prank perhaps, but the late hour and the raspy voice sent shivers down her spine. She checked the locks on her doors and windows, seeking a sense of security. Unable to shake off the unease, Sarah called the local sheriff's office. Sheriff Thompson assured her he would send a deputy to patrol the area. Sarah's pulse quickened. Was it just the wind, playing tricks on her already frayed nerves? Or was it the source of the menacing phone call, lurking outside her home? Fear, primal and instinctive, propelled her towards the window. Peering through the blinds, she scanned the darkness, her heart pounding in her chest. She could see nothing but the storm-tossed branches and the relentless downpour. Suddenly, a loud thump from the back of the house shattered the silence. Sarah gasped, her blood turning to ice. Someone was trying to break in. She froze, her mind racing. Her hand trembled as she reached for her phone. Before she could connect the call, another crash echoed through the house. The back door flew open, splintering wood and shattering glass. A shadowy figure stepped inside. Panic seized Sarah. The police arrived within minutes, sirens wailing, breaking the terrifying tableau. The intruder, startled by the noise, had already fled back into the stormy night. Sarah, shaking and breathless, was found huddled in a corner, the iron poker still clutched tightly in her hand. A week after the incident, Sarah made the difficult decision to move. She packed her belongings and left the small town in Oregon, seeking a fresh start. The fear lingered, a constant shadow in her life. The memories haunted her dreams, a constant reminder of the night her life changed forever. To this day, the identity and motive of the intruder remain a mystery. So, there's this guy, Carlos, who loves the quiet nights. He just moved into a new pad in Mexico City. While the city snoozed, Carlos was wide awake. He dug the peace and quiet of those late hours. His new place, with its high ceilings and old windows, was like a chill zone. But on his first night, he felt something weird. It was subtle, like a low hum of static in the air. He shrugged it off, thinking it was just new place vibes. Little did he know, this was just the start. His apartment, looking all normal, had some secrets. Secrets that were about to come out. The second night, the hum got louder. Carlos felt weird. He tried to read, but that noise was super annoying. It was like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Something moved in the corner of his eye, and he freaked out. He spun around, but there was nothing. Was he just seeing things? The hum got louder, almost like it was whispering. He started to get really scared. He tried to tell himself it was just the old building making noises. So it's the third night, and Carlos is totally freaked out. The static noise. Yeah, it's always there now. And those shadows. They keep dancing around, just out of sight. He's shivering even though it's not even cold. Then he hears it. Tap, tap, tap. It's coming from the window. His heart's racing. The tapping gets louder, more desperate. Carlos can't breathe. He's stuck, scared stiff. Carlos, fed up with the noise, finally decided to check it out and walked towards the window. His hand was shaking as he reached for the curtain. The tapping stopped. For a moment, everything was dead silent. Then he saw it. An outline barely visible on the other side of the glass. A hand. A face. Pressed against the window, staring right at him. Carlos freaked out and screamed. He stumbled back, knocking over a lamp in his panic. He fumbled for his phone, desperate to call for help, but the phone slipped from his hand, hitting the floor with a loud clatter. He felt trapped, alone with whatever was on the other side of the glass. Carlos backed away from the window, his eyes glued to the creepy figure. He bumped into the wall, his heart pounding like crazy. He could hear faint laughter now, echoing from the other side of the glass. As he watched in terror, the face at the window twisted into a creepy smile, and the hand slowly reached out, like it was calling him closer. Then, everything went dark. When the cops showed up, alerted by worried neighbors who heard the commotion, they found Carlos's apartment empty. Furniture was overturned, a lamp lay shattered on the floor, and an icy stillness hung in the air. The only sign of Carlos was a set of handprints on the inside of the window, small and perfect, like those of a child. To this day, the mystery of Carlos's disappearance remains unsolved. Some say his apartment, with its weird vibes and strange energy, pulled him into the shadows to join whatever was lurking on the other side of the window. It was one of those nights where the rain just wouldn't let up. You know, the kind of rain that makes the roads all shiny and makes everything feel just a little off. Ethan, a 28-year-old guy who worked night shifts, was driving back home after grabbing a late-night coffee at this little gas station just off the interstate in Louisiana. Ethan liked driving at night. Roads were empty, no distractions, just the sound of rain tapping on the windshield. But this night had a vibe. Something about it didn't sit right. The hum of the tires on the wet pavement, the faint flicker of a broken streetlight, it all felt off. Ethan's heartbeat quickened, a gut instinct telling him to leave. He pulled into the gas station a little after midnight. It wasn't one of those big, brightly lit spots. Nah, this was a tiny rundown joint with one flickering light over the pumps in a small convenience store. The rain was pouring hard, so he parked close to the door and jogged inside. The clerk behind the counter didn't even glance up, glued to his phone. Ethan grabbed his coffee, paid for it, and headed back to his truck. That's when he noticed him. A guy standing by the side of the building, right under the edge of the overhang. This guy wasn't holding an umbrella, didn't even seem to care about the rain soaking him. He was tall, scruffy, wearing a dark hoodie that clung to him from the rain. What really got Ethan, though, was how the guy was just standing there, not moving, staring at the parking lot. Not at Ethan, not at the gas pumps, just staring. Ethan felt that knot in his stomach tighten. You know that gut feeling you get when something's just not right? Yeah, that. He tried to shake it off, muttering to himself about how he was probably overthinking it. But as he got into his truck, he glanced back at the guy. The dude was looking at him now, not in some casual way either. His head was tilted slightly, and he had this faint grin that made Ethan's skin crawl. The guy wasn't doing anything, but somehow that made it worse. Ethan locked his doors, just in case, and started his truck. As he pulled out, the guy didn't move, didn't look away. Ethan kept an eye on him in the rearview mirror until the gas station disappeared into the rainy night. A few miles down the road, Ethan realized his hands were gripping the wheel way too tight. He let out a nervous laugh, trying to brush it off. Just some weirdo, he thought, but deep down he couldn't shake the unease. The next morning, Ethan's phone buzzed with a news alert. Truck attack in New Orleans leaves several injured. His stomach dropped as he clicked the link. The article described a suspect, a scruffy guy in his 30s wearing a hoodie, last seen near a gas station off the interstate. Ethan froze. The description wasn't perfect. This guy had a beard, and the news didn't mention anything about a grin, but it was close enough to make his heart race. Could it have been the same guy? Or was his mind just playing tricks on him? He spent the rest of the day trying to convince himself it was just a coincidence. Plenty of people fit that description, right? But every time he thought about it, he'd see that grin, that tilted head, and the way the guy had just stood there in the rain. To this day, Ethan doesn't know if the man he saw was the same one from the attack, but he knows one thing. He'll never stop at that gas station again. And when he drives at night, he can't help but glance in his rearview mirror, half expecting to see that scruffy figure standing in the rain, staring back at him. It was a Friday night in a small town in Oregon. Mike Carter, a 27-year-old teacher, was driving home after grabbing dinner with a couple of friends. It was late, around 11:30, and the streets were empty. The rain had just started, a light drizzle that made everything glisten under the streetlights. Mike didn't mind the rain. He liked driving at night. It was quiet, peaceful. His route home cut through a stretch of woods just outside town. The road was dark, twisting and lined with trees on both sides. No streetlights, just his headlights cutting through the black. He was about 10 minutes from home when he noticed something up ahead, a figure, standing on the side of the road. At first, Mike thought it was a deer, but as he got closer, he realized it was a person, a woman, just standing there in the rain. She wasn't waving him down or trying to get his attention. She was just standing still, staring straight ahead. Mike slowed down. Something about it felt off. The woman looked like she was in her mid-30s, completely soaked, with long dark hair plastered to her face. She wasn't wearing a coat, just a thin dress clinging to her from the rain. He rolled his window down slightly as he pulled up beside her. "Mike, hey, are you okay?" She didn't respond. She didn't even look at him, just kept staring straight ahead like he wasn't there. Mike hesitated. Everything about this felt wrong, but he couldn't just drive away. "Mike, you need a ride or something?" Slowly, she turned her head to look at him, and her face, it gave Mike chills. Her expression was blank. Not scared, not sad, just empty, like there was nothing behind her eyes. Mike's instincts told him to leave, but he couldn't bring himself to drive off. Before he could say anything else, the woman turned and started walking toward the woods. Not running, not stumbling, just walking slowly into the darkness. "Mike, wait!" But she didn't stop. She disappeared into the trees without a word. Mike sat there for a moment, feeling a wave of anxiety. He didn't know what to do. Call the cops? Go after her? He wasn't about to go wandering through the woods in the middle of the night, but leaving her out there didn't feel right either. Finally, he grabbed his phone and called the sheriff's office. He explained what happened and gave them his location. The dispatcher told him they'd send someone out to check the area and that he could head home. The drive home was silent. The hum of the tires on the wet pavement was the only sound. Mike's mind was racing. Who was she? Why was she out there alone in the rain? He barely slept that night, replaying the encounter over and over. The quick thump of his heartbeat echoed in his ears. The next morning, Mike called the sheriff's office to follow up. The deputy told him they'd sent officers to check the area, but they hadn't found anyone. No footprints, no signs that anyone had been there. Mike couldn't believe it. He knew what he'd seen. For weeks, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He started taking a different route home, avoiding that stretch of road altogether. But about a month later, he heard something that made his blood run cold. He was talking to a coworker, an older guy named Dave who'd lived in the area his whole life. Mike mentioned the woman he'd seen, not expecting much of a reaction, but Dave's face went pale. "Dave, was it near Miller's Woods?" "Mike." "Yeah," Mike said, his stomach tightening. "Dave, you're not the first person to see her. Folks around here call her the Watcher. She shows up every now and then, always near the woods, always at night. Nobody knows who she is or where she goes. Some say she's looking for something or someone." Mike felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't believe in ghosts or anything like that, but he couldn't deny what he'd seen. And knowing others had seen her too, that only made it creepier. To this day, Mike doesn't know who the woman was or what she was doing out there, but every time it rains, he can't help but think about her. The blank expression, the slow walk into the woods, and the way she just disappeared. So if you're ever driving through a dark, rainy stretch of road late at night and you see someone standing there, maybe think twice before stopping. Sometimes it's better to keep going. So, Mia was just heading home after work, yeah? Nothing crazy, just one of those nights where you're tired, kinda zoned out. Thinking about leftovers and maybe crashing on the couch. It was drizzling, that kind of rain that makes the street all shiny under the lights. Her boots were clicking on the pavement, and the only sound really was her steps and like distant cars on wet roads. Chill, right? But then she gets that feeling, You know, like someone's watching you? She tightened her grip on her phone and did a quick glance back. Not obvious or anything, just enough to check. There's this dude, hoodie up, hands in his pockets, walking behind her. Not super close, but close enough to make her nervous. She's trying to stay calm, right? Telling herself people walk at night. It's not a big deal. But then she takes a turn, and he does too. Steps in sync, just a little behind hers. Her stomach dropped. You ever feel that heat rush through you like your body's screaming, "Run"? That's where she was. But she didn't want to look dumb or paranoid, so she's like, okay, test this out. Cross the street, see if he follows. Guess what? He crossed too. Now her heart's racing. She's thinking, what's this guy's deal? Am I overreacting? Should I run? But her place was a few blocks away, and no way was she leading him there. So she ducks into this little convenience store. Bright lights, people around. Felt safer, you know? She grabs some random drink, acting like she's just shopping. But really, she's watching the door, waiting. A few minutes go by and he doesn't come in. She's like, phew, maybe I was wrong. But nah, she steps out and boom, he's still there, standing across the street, just chilling like he's got nothing better to do. She's full on freaking now. Calls her best friend, trying to sound normal but totally failing. Hey, can you come meet me? Like right now? Her friend doesn't even ask, just says, where are you? I'm coming. Mia heads to this cafe nearby. More lights, more people, sits by the window and keeps an eye on him. Dude doesn't move much, just stays back like he's in no rush. Calm as hell, which honestly made it worse. When her friend finally shows up, Mia bolts out of there, sticking close. They're walking together, scanning every shadow, every alley, but the guy, gone, poof, like he wasn't even there. A couple weeks pass, and she's trying to shake it off, but weird stuff starts happening. Her mail slot rattled one night like someone was messing with it. Another night, she swears she saw a shadow outside her window. She reports it, obviously, but what can the cops do with no proof? They were nice about it, but still, nothing happened. Eventually, she had enough. Packed her stuff, moved to a new place across town, changed her routine, even wiped her socials. And yeah, it helped. But she still gets jumpy walking alone at night, like even now she's always glancing over her shoulder.